In this video, I want to talk about my biggest tip for if you've just got injured, suffered a muscle pain, a pull, a tear, something like that, and you want to get back to your sport and exercise as quickly as possible. In my clinical experience and now my personal experience, I want to reinforce what you should be doing straight away. So let's dive straight in. And as I mentioned, this is one that comes right from the heart and right from personal experience at the moment. It's always great when I get the chance to actually practice what I preach in clinics, and my team preaches a lot of the time. And that's the question that we get is, I've suffered an injury, what do I need to do? I'm desperate to get back to my sport or exercise. What do you think I should be doing in the first instance? Well, this, as I said, comes from personal experience. Just returned from my summer holidays, summer vacations. I'd done a couple of workouts. I was running on treadmills. It was a bit hot where I was, so I'd chosen to run on a treadmill, and then I'd left my things next to the treadmill, sort of bits and pieces, headphones, case and things like that. Finished my workout, and then really stupidly, I know, but we are all human, I bent forward to pick up my stuff off the floor. Did it terribly, didn't squat into it, just bent forwards and felt my hamstring go zing. So real problem for me. Knew I had a bit of a hamstring pull. Didn't think it was too bad, but I knew it was enough to stop me carrying on the running and the exercising things that I wanted to do. So what I did was turn to what I tell people in clinic, and that is to get yourself into water as frequently as possible, because we have a theory behind why water is so helpful, but I have some clear views on why I think getting into water as quickly as possible is exactly what you should be doing when you suffer these injuries. And after all, it has its own term. We term this hydrotherapy. So we know that water has therapeutic benefits. There are some small ones, and then I'm going to move on to talk about what I think is the huge benefit by getting into water. But we know that firstly, water can be nice and calming. So we initially, when we get injured, and I'm the worst for this, suffer a lot of stress, anxiety, panic. I don't want to be stopping doing my exercise. I've got this match coming up, this race coming up, whatever it may be. So actually getting into water can have a very calming effect. And we know that there's a big connection between the body and mind, so we know that that's going to be helpful. We know that just the sort of pressure around the water is going to be helpful for the muscle tissue. It's going to be nice and soothing and start to increase a blood flow to the area, start to produce more nutrients growing to the area, and that's going to help with the injury. But they're some of the smaller ones for me. The big one really comes around buoyancy. And what I mean by that is when we get into water, we get this natural buoyancy. And why is this helpful for us? Well, it allows us to take away the pressure that's being placed on our joints. It almost makes us feel weightless, taking away our body weight. So less pressure going through the area means that we can start to work the muscles in a safer way. And we know that healing and helping muscle tissue is really about finding the right amount of balance that we can place load through the tissue without actually making it worse. So we know that there's a fine line at this point. We know it can be tricky to start pushing the muscle tissue to allow it to return to its previous pre-injured state, but without pushing it too much that we're actually either delaying the rehab process or actually making it longer by making the tissue damage worse. So if we take my example, I suffered a bit of a hamstring issue. I knew that I couldn't do my running anymore. In fact, for the first day, I found walking a little bit sore, or things like going up and down stairs. So I knew that there was no way I could be running. So my next thought is, can I get onto a bike? I knew at this point, probably the amount of knee flexion and extension that I'd be going through might be a bit straining for the hamstring. But what I did was, rather than just sit around and complain and feel sorry for myself, which I started to for an hour or two, but I got myself into water. And I knew that by actually going into this buoyant environment, I could find exercises that work for me. I tried breaststroke firstly, and I found that that motion was too difficult. It was my inside hamstring, so I knew that was going to be tricky for me. So that was my first test, because that motion of putting my leg in against the water resistance was too difficult for the hamstring. But I found that if I just swum in a front crawl and I kept my legs nice and straight with small flutters coming from the ankle rather than the knee, and using my arms more predominantly, I could actually get about some swimming without putting any strain through the hamstring. I actually found that I could start to walk pain-free from the water. So I spent some time walking up and down in the pool. It was a shallow pool that I could walk up and down in. I found on day 2 and day 3 that I could start to squat in the pool. I could start to load that tissue, but it wasn't things that I could have been doing out of the pool because my body weight would have put too much force through the area. But using this buoyancy of the water, I found that I could start to progress my exercises. And by day 4, I'd actually taken to running in the water. I was able to run in the water pain-free. And so that's now allowed me, now I'm 6 days post suffering that injury, to be feeling much better about the injury and starting to factor in now these exercises back on land and using my weight and starting to progress those exercises back. So it's important to say at this point that I'm not saying for everybody who suffers a hamstring pull, that's something you can do. Mine, I think, was probably only a small grade 1 tear, but it was enough to keep me off of my sport for a small period of time. But what I can say is that by finding the level of exercise that you can do is going to be a lot easier in water. So if you have suffered an injury, if you are feeling pain, if possible, I would strongly encourage you to get into water where possible. For example, even if we get an injury, we probably enjoy getting into the bath. People often say to me that they don't feel pain when they're in the bath because we're getting these therapeutic benefits of the water. But getting into the bath and being pain-free is one thing, but ultimately, we are all striving forward for our health and well-being here. We want to be getting back to doing our exercise. So it might be that we have to modify a little bit, but my first port of call with clients is always to see if we can get into a pool and start to do these lighter versions of the exercises. And sometimes it can be frustrating for people. We might feel a little bit strange if we start doing certain squats or walking up and down a pool. Isn't exactly what we want to be doing, but it's better than just lying on the sofa and feeling sorry for yourself. So if you have suffered an injury, I would always be recommending that you get that checked medically so that you can be understanding exactly what is your injury. But one thing that I would always challenge people to ask is, what can I do, and can I get back into water? And if I can get into water, what are the exercises that I can be doing? As I said, for me, I started with a very modified program of each day just slowly progressing the amount of load that I was putting through the tissue, but I have found those benefits to be hugely helpful, and I'm convinced much more helpful 6 days post-injury than I would have been had I not done anything on that. So in summary, if you suffered an injury, get yourself down to that pool. Try and make it as regular as possible. If you're feeling pain in the water, then you'll know you're doing exercises that aren't the right things for you to be doing. But the key is to find those exercises that don't hurt, but to start to gently be loading the tissue whilst getting those therapeutic benefits that hydrotherapy brings of calming ourselves down, and actually the hydrostatic pressure around the area can be very helpful. And if you have a chance to use something like a jacuzzi, that was another thing I was able to do while I was on a holiday, was I was actually able to use the pressure of the jets into that hamstring area, almost like having a percussion massager or a massage gun working on the area, which again was another thing that I found to be helpful. So a huge fan of hydrotherapy and using water to get you back to feeling good again. And if this is something you've done, if this is something you agree with, if this is something you disagree with, let me know in the comments. I come back to each comment and I would love to get your opinions. As I say, it was a video that I felt compelled to do for you guys, as it was something that I've experienced only in the last week. And it's just reminded me of all the times that I'm recommending to people to get back into the water, that actually sometimes it's great, not that I want to get injured all the time, but it's great to see that just experience personally just how helpful that can be. Has this video been helpful for you? But if it hasn't, you've made it this far through the video, you can show me that and show me that it's been helpful by smashing that like button down below. And as I said, drop me a comment, let me know your views on it, or anything else that you think is even better than water in those early stages, because that would be great to discuss as well. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel, why not? You want to be joining us when we go through these tips on your health and well-being, and ultimately helping us all to strive forwards to hit those health and well-being goals. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification, because then I'll be letting you know about our next video. And I'll see you on that one.